Before we get started with the video, a little starting bonus meme for all of you. Of course, Star Citizen 3.7 patch notes for the PTU are out. Very exciting time. Lots of new stuff coming out. Caves, finding stuff in caves, new ships, the Banu Defender, and speaking of which, the testing focus here is the Banu Defender. The Banu Defender is there, so people are going to be getting into it. They're going to be getting into the cockpit. We're going to see how that all looks. Banu Defender, slight problem though. Known issues. Currently, there's a collision that's preventing entry into the Defender. Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is Ship Updates. Now, of course, today we are doing the Mantis Q&A. So, answers to many of the important questions that we are looking for the RSI Mantis yet to be released. 3.7 is just making it onto the PTU. The notes are out and they're kind of funny, but you know, it's to be expected. It really is. Also, very quickly, I am not the narrator of any computer science class videos. Governing Access, a longtime viewer, sent me a message saying, my girlfriend thinks you're narrating her computer science class videos. No, that's not me, but if you want, I can try to do my best announcer voice for the rest of this video, but it'll probably kill my voice box while trying to record it, so I'm going to revert back to just speaking like me. But anyways, on with the show. Alright, first off, will we be able to fit interdiction devices to other ships? So obviously they're talking about quantum enforcement devices, kind of a weird name there, something that probably needs to get kind of fixed up a little bit. But they're saying yes, quantum enforcement devices or quantum interdictors or interdiction devices, anything would be a lot more handy to use than that as a word. Yeah, you are going to be able to fit these. There's going to be optional equipment slots on a ship. I don't know if it's going to quite work out like, let's say, Elite Dangerous or anything like that. But, we are going to have optional equipment slots, but they do kind of go in and say, hey, it's going to cost a lot of energy. It's going to generate a lot of heat. They talk about that a little bit later. So there's going to be a cost, and you may have to make some trade-offs when you're doing that. Though, possibly, there are some other ships, hint, hint, that may have a lot of open space and extra resources for a piece of equipment like that. But we don't know right now. Right now, it's limited to the Mantis and other future possible interdiction specialized ships, which we'll get into in a little bit. There's some interesting answers around that. All right, will we gain crime stat for pulling people/criminals out of quantum travel? In certain jurisdictions in the future, yes, you will. However, at present, obviously, this is something that they want to test. Unlike the Banu Defender, they're going to make it so you can get into the cockpit and actually get out and test it. But so you're not going to earn crime stat right away. And possibly the system that supports that is currently not implemented yet or functional. So they do want you to get out. They do want you to test it. You're not going to get crime stat for interdicting people right away, though in the future, depending on where you are, it could be very, very bad indeed. All right, next, why would the UEE allow such a ship to be sold to regular civilians? Good question. If interdiction devices are illegal, how is RSI selling them? Long story short, well, obviously, because you're going to be working for the police and you're going to be helping them, so you can use an interdiction device for defense, which, when you go further into reading this article, they're like, oh man, when you use interdiction, you're overheating, you're using up a lot of energy, your ship's immobilized. Not really a good defensive choice, though they bring it up as a defensive weapon or effect. And so, kind of not reading that. This is an offensive weapon. It's not defensive in any way. When you realize all the cost that goes along with using it, it getting into the hands of civilians as an official ship like from RSI doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think as an optional piece of equipment that you could obtain in places like Levski or Grim Hex, or with a certain standing, perhaps you could obtain it from the military with, having a certain reputation or fulfilling certain other requirements, possibly. But as a ship being sold to the general public doesn't make any sense. So the answer here, they try to rationalize it, but in the end, why are they selling them? Because RSI in the real world wants money. That's pretty much it. All right, what will the counter to this new feature be? Of course, we dealt with that yesterday. Do you plan to allow more flexibility with quantum travel so that we can better avoid the main travel lanes, like quantum traveling in any direction without first setting a destination? So that would be like the free quantum that we had prior to us having to lock to a destination, something I talked about in depth earlier this week. While being able to create safer routes on your own is a planned feature, it's not scheduled with the release of the Mantis. Currently, connecting existing quantum nav points will be your best/only bet for avoiding, a quantum snare, which kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, because they're saying, connecting existing quantum nav points. So go from one to another and then stop and then go in the other direction to get to where you're actually trying to go to is the best way to avoid it. But it becomes so painfully obvious how you avoid this and how easy it is to avoid it, because basic geometry, kind of will tell you that. It kind of negates itself, that they're basically saying, like, yeah, you can just do this, and everyone knows you can just do that. So as an interdiction sphere, as a weapon that you would place between 2 points, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's actually kind of dumb. But as a ship that could potentially pursue another ship, it becomes interesting. But when you deal with the energy requirements and the overheat and the fact that you can't actually escape, you can see how this ship could very easily become, priority target number one. And it's not all that much ship. So still, we're still kind of dealing with there are features that I like here. And oh yeah, by the way, I do notice the struts on the interior of the windshields now, like one of the viewers was mentioning. But it may be something of like a kamikaze ship. So as you read more into it, you realize that perhaps it's a good idea that this ship wasn't up for sale right away, because there's probably a few people who would be going like, oh my god, gotta buy it, and then finding this stuff out later. Yikes. So like, kind of good that it gives people a bit of a cool down period after the initial oh my god to kind of think about this, though maybe to CIG's detriment. Alright, the player versus player implications are obvious, but what examples of player versus environment PvE gameplay for the Mantis can you give us? Well, that actually is just like the PvP implications. Obvious. You can snare NPC ships. Oh my god, I never thought of that usage. Once NPC ships traveling between points actually make it into the game. Great question there. Next up, when you fire off your interdiction device, will it negatively impact your allies too? Of course it will. Of course. Alright. Is the RSI Mantis designed to fit inside the hangar of the Polaris? Everything can fit inside the Polaris. But this actually becomes interesting because they come back to it and they talk about the 890 jump getting an upsized hangar. Potentially the Polaris is going to get a little bit upsized to standard landing pad metrics, and so it could carry the Mantis. But beyond that would also mean that the Polaris could fit a Cutlass, and that sounds a little bit more promising. Alright, will it have a bed toilet? It's not even a question. Next up, is Interdiction gameplay complete? Or will there be more iteration on the mechanic? The mechanic that hasn't even made it into the game yet, that we haven't even seen, that we haven't even tried, tested, and learned how to use / abuse? No, it's finished. It's ironclad. It is the way it's going to be, and it's never going to change. Absolutely not. Just like the rest of the game. Bravo. That was an amazing question. Next, will the disruption field work inside of a ship? Like if it's activated inside a Polaris, will it still work as if it were outside the hangar? No. Didn't even need the rest of this. Just no. Can an EMP disable the interdiction bubbles set off by the Mantis? Not directly, though an EMP should disrupt the Mantis's power plant long enough to prevent the QED from functioning. So I guess it cycles. So let's say you put up an interdiction sphere, or are they talking perhaps about when you're, when you just have the short range, the little quick one where you're just keeping everybody within 2,000 meters from getting away. You're not snaring somebody outside of quantum, but you're preventing someone from getting away. That one would cycle, and hitting them with an EMP could prevent it from cycling again. Possibly putting it on some kind of a cooldown. Who knows? That's very interesting though. So I'm guessing that's the application that they're talking about with that. Alright, next. What does an interdiction cost for a Mantis pilot? Fuel, energy drain, crime stat, time? A QED requires a lot of energy and generates a lot of heat, so it isn't a very stealthy weapon. When jurisdiction laws are enabled, crime stat increase and direct retaliation by law enforcement will be the cost, obviously. Alright. Next, will there be a size limitation to the ships the RSI Mantis can stop? Now this is a good question here. In its first implementation, it will be able to stop any ship of any size. As we iterate on the feature, kind of going back to that previous question, no, it's finished, it needs no iteration, and develop more versions of QED, will determine the QED to quantum size balance. So that kind of raises an interesting question. Could you possibly bring in a small enough QED that you could snare one ship out of a group while the rest of the group keeps on flying right past you? Interesting possibility there. So I'm gonna be very interested to see how this thing develops. But I'm probably gonna go more for just being able to put a QED device on another ship rather than flying around in this ship, just because 2 guns, a smattering of missiles, and not all that much in terms of defense, and of course being a priority target. I don't know if that's a good idea. Is there any cargo capacity on the RSI Mantis? Why did you even ask that? Next, is the Mantis immune to its own interdiction effects? Of course not. Next and last, what's the cooldown on using the device? While we're still balancing the QED, expect a cooldown of at least several minutes. So I'm guessing that would be the snare, or that would be the interdiction, where you're trying to interdict a route rather than putting up the sphere around a bunch of people. So several minutes, 2-3 minutes, 4 minutes, who knows? But I mean, if you're operating it at a time limited thing, maybe it's not the snare, maybe it's the field that you can chase people around with. Maybe, I don't know. It's going to be I wish they'd kind of gone into more depth on that question with their answer, because these answers really kind of went quick and easy with these last ones. And I think that this requires a lot more depth into what application we're talking about when we're using it. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see. And hopefully they'll give us a second Q&A or, you know, some more depth on the forums as to their responses here, because I would like to know a little bit more about that. But apart from that, that is the QSA, or QSA.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.